Michele, we are so happy to have you with us today, because, you are an incredible woman. So if you don't mind, I'd like, before the question I have for you, I'd like to give our audience some more information about you. Michele, you are an American businesswoman, investor, and philanthropist. In 2022, you became the first woman to own a US-based National Women's Soccer League team, the Washington Spirit. In 2023, you signed an agreement with the Olympique Lyonnais group to purchase the OL Féminin, creating the first of its kind global multi-team women's soccer organization. In December 2023, you further expand your impact at creating the London City Lionesses. I don't know if I pronounce it.
Yes, correct.
Yes, it's correct. The only fully independent women's-only football club among England's top two professional women's leagues. You received, of course, a lot of awards, Michele, and you are one of the most influential figures in sports now. Yes, you can be proud of that. You understand why we are so happy to welcome Michele today. So you have done so much for women's soccer. You have a lot of ambition for your clubs, but beyond that, for women's soccer and perhaps women's sports. And you come with an inspiring model, and we are going to talk about today. So the first question I have for you, Michele, is a very general vision of the future of women's soccer. What is your vision for the women's soccer?
So if you haven't followed women's sports, I tell you, you're a little behind. It's happening. It's a movement. And I think it's not just the U.S. or some other countries. I think it's a global phenomenon. And I think it is backed by not only the number of viewers or the attendance, but also the level of investment. I understand David before talked about actually men's basketball is not for playing, but for business. I can imagine men's sports talking about not charity or not advocacy, but business. But my vision, and I think it's been shared by a lot of people, is that women's sports is not charity. And I think we're all moving from advocacy or social cause to real legitimate business. And I think you can see that, especially in NWSL, the valuation of women's sports teams have skyrocketed. So 5 years ago, a team was sold for $3 million. 4 years ago, $5 million. 3 years ago, $35 million. Last year, $53 million. This year, one team is sold for $120 million in the U.S., and another team probably will get something like close to $200 million. So that's about 70 times increase in over a 5-year period. And I can tell you the viewership did not grow by 70 times, but it was a pent-up demand. It's people are discovering. I don't know, I'm going to probably offend somebody here, but I watched the Champions League final, both men and women's game. Clearly, Lyon made it all the way to the final. But I watched the men's game as well the past weekend. I don't know if you watched that game. I want somebody to tell me that men's game, first half especially, was better than women's game. In my opinion, women's Champions Final League was as exciting as women's game, as a soccer, sophisticated football kind of game. So I think it is taking notice. People are paying attention, but I think it is an incredible business opportunity as well. So what I'm trying to do is to build women's sports at scale, because you need to invest. You're not going to just have people come in because we're women's sports. It is a real business. We have to have a compelling business reason, business value proposition for fans to come into the to the stadium. So we have to invest heavily in our training methodology, training centers, stadiums. So you can't really do that for one team right now because the revenue is not really that great, and therefore I'm doing the multi-club. But we need to do this at scale, and we need to accelerate. The women's football, women's sports cannot be just English, French, U.S. phenomenon. It has to be a global phenomenon. So my goal is to make whatever investment I'm making, something like the training women as women, state-of-the-art training center, all those things are going to be made available globally at the same time that I make those things available. So it's really about building this women's sports at scale, not only just from the product perspective, but David talked about fan experience. Building fan experiences is critical, and accelerate on a global basis. And I think the sky is the limit.
Michele, perhaps you can come back to the multi-club ownership strategy you have, because you have those 3 teams now, and you have a lot of ambition to use good practice from a club to another. So you have a kind of collective approach between your clubs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I understand, I'm aware that on the men's side, multi-club has a very negative connotation, negative sense. But to me, on the women's side, it's really a necessity because we don't have the kind of media deals that men's sports teams have. So our revenue is not as big as men. So we don't have a lot of resources to invest, but they need investment. And for one team, it's very hard to invest, for example, training women as women. So there are, as you may have heard until now, the women's sports, especially team sports, by and large borrow training manual from men's teams, as if women are small men. Women have very fundamentally different biology and physiology, hormones, nutrition, and sleep and all that. So we have to really understand female physiology, biology, and actually adjust our training methodology. A lot of ACL injuries happen during their menstruation period. The day before, the most recent study indicated that the day before your period starts, you're 7 times more likely to get injured. So now how do we change our training methodology? To invest those in areas at scale for one team is nearly impossible. But if you actually pull up multiple teams and pull the resources together, you can build those central platforms at scale, not just really poor man's kind of investment. So it's really about that scaling up and investing at scale and accelerating, as I said, this movement and making all these things available to as many teams as possible at the same time and really raising the bar high.
So, Michele, it is all about performance, but we were talking also about business. How do you manage to put women's sport on the same footing as the men's one, on a business point of view? Because there is the media exposure, the venues, the fan experience. So how do you manage to get that in a country, where we have some difference? We will come back to the difference after between France and other countries. But perhaps what is the model you have just to give all the women on a business point of view the same resources?
Well, so to me, I don't think it's any different than any other business, right? You have to understand who your customers are, in this case, who your fans are. In general, women's sports fans, especially women's football, they're not the same as men's football. Women's football fans tend to be more family, women, children, and so forth. So you have to understand who your fans are, and then you have to build the experience. It's not just 90 minutes of watching football, but all coming to the game and at the stadium during the game and after the game. So you have to really cater to our fans to build that overall fan experience so that they will come and watch the game 13 weekends or 15 weekends a year. I don't think women's sports are necessarily competing against men's games. More importantly to me, women's sports are competing against all other forms of entertainment. All of us have only 7 evenings a week. And you can go out and have dinner. You can go out see a concert. You can go go hiking and whatever. So we're competing against those things. So why they should come to our game. So you really have to start understanding who your fans are and build the right value proposition for those fans, both in terms of experience, in terms of pricing, in terms of course, the attractiveness of the product. And I think all starts from there. I think the media deal is almost like existential opportunity and threat for women's sports, for that matter, any others. But I think that would be something that we have to catch up. We're sitting in a basketball arena, so for those of you who watches the basketball in the U.S., there's a huge phenomenon, women's basketball, Caitlin Clark. So NCAA final game, women's game, was watched by 20 million people. Men's NCAA game was watched by 15 million people. And yet the media deal dollar value was 12-1 the other way around. So we need to catch up. It takes time, but I think we need to catch up on those type of things. But it all starts from understanding who your fans are and how you build those fan experience and investing in fans and making the best possible product, which is the game and the competitiveness. And it goes from there.
So you survey the fans in Lyon, and you had a very good surprise with the results. I've heard from American research. We don't have that kind of survey, unfortunately, in France. That the fans of women's sport are very much engaged. They are involved with the team, but also with all the partners. Is it right?
Yeah, so when I first came to France and Lyon, a lot of people told me, you don't understand, this is not America. French don't like to go see outdoor games, unless it's, I guess, Taylor Swift. So I was like, okay, I'll take that as a challenge. The first thing we did in Lyon was we did a customer survey, basically fan survey. We sent out, 6,000 surveys to some women's team fans, men's fans, and just random people who never came to watch a game. And the most amazing thing, I was in the business before, and I surveyed a lot of customers, and I've done a lot of surveys. When we send out about 6,000 surveys, within 48 hours, over 5,000 people who received those surveys responded, completed the survey. That kind of response rate is unheard of in any business. You don't see that. I was very, very impressed how there is a pent-up demand again. And they share a lot of actually wisdoms about why they come, why they don't come, what ticks them, and so forth. So we started working based upon understanding our fan base in Lyon, but increasingly, just to make you get to the bottom line. One of the last games when we played against PSG for the 7th time, we had 38,614 people to the Groupama Stadium. It was the team record, right? No one would have believed that. Even a lot of Lyon fans were kind of like, oh yeah, good luck. You're not going to get the fans into Groupama. You're going to play at the training center, 1,200-seat stadiums. But we had almost 40,000 people, right? If we had more time and we had more advanced fan experience program, which we're building, we would have more people. So even the Champions League fans women's game, it was over 50,000 in Bilbao, Spain. So it's growing. It really all starts from really understanding the fans and investing in that. And I think it's a very, very exciting form of investment. And I think a lot of fans also resonate because you have no idea how many people come up to me and say, I have a daughter, I have a granddaughter who plays soccer. They show me their pictures and they're so excited that women's football, women's soccer is growing so that their girls are being inspired to pursue their dreams, whether that's playing soccer or women's sports, and that's really what gets me going.
So there is an issue with the stadium. I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but the first time you went to Lyon and you went to the pitch and to see the team, you thought it was the warm-up pitch, and no, it was the pitch where they will play the game. So you have a really an issue to have a nice stadium ready to welcome all those fans. So do you have new plans or something to say about that now?
Yeah, so Olympique Lyonnais has really one of the best stadiums called Groupama, right? It's about 60,000 capacity, state-of-the-art, one of the newest stadiums. I wish our women's team can play every single game there and either sell out or near sell out. We're not quite there yet. But when I first came to see the Olympique Lyonnais game, the best women's team in history, right? So I expected a lot more. And then I was taken to this pitch to a training center where they train. And I thought initially I was just taken to where they're practicing before the game. And it turns out that that's where they play actual regular season games. And it's basically, in America, I think you would call it bleacher section of like 1,200 seats. And it's literally a training center pitch. And I was flabbergasted that the best women's sports team, football team, is playing at a 1,200 bleacher section, sort of a stadium. So there is some happy medium between 1,200 and 60,000. Ultimately, in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, like Arsenal now in England, they played only 8 games this past season in the big stadium, but now they're going to play their entire season games at the men's stadium. So they're actually now, they have figured out how to sell out for a women's game. We're going to get there, but probably not in the next a year or two. So we're definitely looking for an opportunity to play somewhere around 15 to 20,000 for most of the games. But the big games, Champions League games, our games against the biggest rival, PSG, we're definitely going to play in Groupama increasingly more games there as other French teams invest and become competitive.
What kind of evolution you saw since you first purchased the Washington Spirit? It's a very short time because you did it only 2 years ago. In 2 years, you built something incredible, a project with 3 teams. And do you already see a kind of evolution since that?
Yeah, I think it's actually huge. I think in just 2 years, not only me personally, but if you just look at the overall women's football, both in the U.S., England, France, and Spain, and Germany, just the growth is exponential. And especially in the U.S. right now, I think U.S. NWSL is the most competitive league. In the last season, until the last game in November, it took the last game, whatever, the 23rd game, to decide which 6 teams are going to move to the final. No one knew because it was so competitive. Every week, the ratings changed. And it is incredibly exciting. We have 2 more teams now in the U.S., and it's as competitive, if not more, than last year. So competition is really good. And I think in the U.S., the level of investment is unbelievable. I just told you about the valuation of the team. If you look at NWSL, right now we have 14 teams. I would say only about 2-3 teams have the same owner 2-3 years ago. A lot of them are new investors. They actually, these are the investors who saw the potential as business as well as women's sports, and they all came in and investing really heavily. I think that's sort of a spreading elsewhere, and as I said, I think it needs to be accelerated. There are funds that are now dedicated to investing in women's sports. So I think it's just a matter of time that it's going to catch up, but just the competitively, as well as the fan experience, media deals, even the U.S. in the media deal, until last year, it was like $1.5 million per year for the entire league. Now we have about $60 million a year. So it's happening. It's a movement. So join in. So
in France, you have also a responsibility not only for the Olympique Lyonnais, but you have interested in having a much more competitive French women's league. So we have 12 clubs. So and I know that you are a member also of the European Club Association. So you really have a commitment to have more competition in this league in France and in Europe. So what will you do with the French league, with the brand new French league?
Yeah, I think, again, I think that they're going back to the same theme, investment, right? So teams need to invest in women's sports, not as charity, not as advocacy or forced to invest because it is a, sort of a thing to do. I mean, I think to me it's perfectly okay for any team to say, that owns both women's and men's teams, say, our priority is men's team. We don't really think that women's team is right for us. It's perfectly okay for the team to say that. I'm a business person. That's perfectly okay. Then focus on men's team. Then let people who are interested in investing in women's team to come in and invest. So I think that's beginning to happen. And I think that the teams need to invest in terms of roster. I understand there are some teams still who are part-time players as opposed to full-time players. Stadiums, so for example, in the U.S., for you to compete in NWSL, you have to have a stadium of at least 10,000 seats, FIFA-compliant pitches, natural pitch, and VAR capacity. So there's sort of a minimum standards that you need to meet to play in the professional league. So we need to go into that kind of mode to encourage and share best practices among teams, and I share with other owners whatever I can do to help. We'll be very happy to share our best practices, training women as women, all those type of things. So the level of investment and setting some minimum standards, I think, will be pretty important to raise the bar.
So if we, just to finish, the main differences between France, now our market, and the United States or England. Well, we talk about the venue, about the investment, but perhaps what about the media exposure and another subject, the role model, the players ourselves. We don't really have role model in France. You have, for example, in United States. So do you expect from those players to be much more engaged in the project?
Yeah, so actually France has incredible set of players. I mean, we have Randy Renard. So it is really up to the teams to share the stories about our players and get our players known and so forth. So I think that's a very important part. In fact, actually, a lot of fans actually come to follow certain players, not necessarily the team. So having our players be very visible and sharing their stories, either social media, during the fan. I mean, our players spend about half an hour to an hour after the game to sign every jerseys and everything and so forth. So building that relationship with our fans, I think, is going to be very important. So there's yet another level of investment that we need to do.
So, Michele, we have to conclude. We would have so many questions more for you, but I wanted just to thank you again to be with you. You want to add something?
I just want to make one more comment. So you talk about media and so forth. So a lot of people say, no one watches women's game and they don't come to the game. Well, right now in France, women's games are being broadcasted at, guess what, 9 p.m. Sunday night. And we've been talking about fans. A lot of our fans are family, children. I think you're irresponsible parents if you keep your kids up at 9 p.m. Sunday night, let alone taking them to a stadium and then go home at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. So, and then they say, oh, no one watches women's game. So I think we have to work together to figure out how to make our women's games more visible in France so that it's in the right time for our fan base, like, you know, early afternoon, early evening, or in the middle of the day on Sundays. So to make the women's sport successful, it's not even just the team's investment. All the stakeholders need to work together, media partners being very important, and make this happen.
Thank you, Michele. So thank you again for your commitment, for your engagement in women's sports. And I will switch a few words in French. Voilà, je suis absolument ravie qu'on ait pu avoir Michele aujourd'hui avec nous parce que c'est un modèle qui est extrêmement inspirant et qui doit nous ouvrir la voie aussi vers un effort plus collectif. Là, on a parlé du foot féminin, mais c'est aussi le sport en général parce qu'on grandira évidemment tous ensemble dans un esprit de business avec pragmatisme, step by step. Et c'est ce que vous démontrez every day, Michele. Thank you very much again. Thank you.